the ice fall. For its trouble, the designated team was to be paid $2,200 from each of the other expeditions on the mountain. In recent years, this cooperative approach had been met with wide, if not universal, acceptance, but it wasn't always so. The first time one expedition thought to charge another to travel through the ice was in 1988, when a lavishly funded American team announced that any expedition that intended to follow the route they'd engineered up the icefall would have to fork over $2,000. Some of the other teams on the mountain that year, failing to understand that Everest was no longer merely a mountain, but a commodity as well, were incensed. And the greatest hue and cry came from Rob Hall, who was leading a small, impecunious New Zealand team. Hall carped that the Americans were violating the spirit of the hills and practicing a shameful form of alpine extortion. But Jim Frush, the unsentimental attorney who was the leader of the American group, remained unmoved. Hall eventually agreed through clenched teeth to send Frush a check and was granted passage through the icefall. Frush later reported that Hall never made good on his IOU. Within 2 years, however, Hall did an about-face and came to see the logic of treating the icefall as a toll road. Indeed, from 1993 through 95, he volunteered to put in the route and collect the toll himself. In the spring of 1996, he elected not to assume responsibility for the icefall, but he was happy to pay the leader of a rival commercial expedition, a Scottish Everest veteran named Mal Duff, to take over the job. Note: although I use commercial to denote any expedition organized as a money-making venture, not all commercial expeditions are guided. For instance, Mal Duff, who charged his clients considerably less than the $65,000 fee requested by Hall and Fisher.
Check, check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Test, test. Good morning, welcome. This is a test. Audio, 1, 2, 3, 4. Check, 1, 2, 3.
Provided leadership and the essential infrastructure necessary to climb Everest, food, tents, bottled oxygen, fixed ropes, Sherpa support staff, and so on, but did not purport to act as a guide. The climbers on his team were assumed to be sufficiently skilled to get themselves safely up Everest and back down again. End of note. Long before we'd even arrived at base camp, a team of Sherpas employed by Duff had blazed a zigzag path through the seracs, stringing out more than a mile of rope and installing some 60 aluminum ladders over the broken surface of the glacier. The ladders belonged to an enterprising Sherpa from the village of Gorak Shep, who turned a nice profit by renting them out each season. So it came to pass that at 4:45 a.m. on Saturday, April 13th, I found myself at the foot of the fabled icefall, strapping on my crampons in the frigid pre-dawn gloom. Crusty old alpinists who've survived a lifetime of close scrapes like to counsel young protégés that staying alive hinges on listening carefully to one's inner voice. Tales abound of one or another climber who decided to remain in his or her sleeping bag after detecting some inauspicious vibe in the ether and thereby survived a catastrophe that wiped out others who failed to heed the portents. I didn't doubt the potential value of paying attention to subconscious cues. As I waited for Rob to lead the way, the ice underfoot emitted a series of loud cracking noises, like small trees being snapped in two, and I felt myself wince with each pop and rumble from the glacier's shifting depths. problem was, my inner voice resembled Chicken Little. It was screaming that I was about to die, but it did that almost every time I laced up my climbing boots. I therefore did my damnedest to ignore my histrionic imagination and grimly followed Rob into the eerie blue labyrinth. Although I'd never been in an ice fall as frightening as the Khumbu, I'd climbed many other ice falls. They typically have vertical or even overhanging passages that demand considerable expertise with ice axe and crampons. There was certainly no lack of steep ice in the Khumbu icefall, but all of it had been rigged with ladders or ropes or both, rendering the conventional tools and techniques of ice climbing largely superfluous. I soon learned that on Everest, not even the rope, the quintessential climber's accoutrement, was to be utilized in the time-honored manner. Ordinarily, one climber is tied to one or two partners with a 150-foot length of rope, making each person directly responsible for the life of the others. Roping up in this fashion is a serious and very intimate act. In the icefall, though, expediency dictated that each of us climb independently, without being physically connected to one another in any way. Mal Duff's Sherpas had anchored a static line of rope that extended from the bottom of the icefall to its top. Attached to my waist was a 3-foot-long safety tether with a carabiner, or snap link, at the distal end. Security was achieved not by roping myself to a teammate, but rather by clipping my safety tether to the fixed line and sliding it up the rope as I ascended. Climbing in this fashion, we would be able to move as quickly as possible through the most dangerous parts of the icefall, and we wouldn't have to entrust our lives to teammates whose skill and experience were unknown. As it turned out, not once during the entire expedition would I ever have reason to rope myself to another climber. If the icefall